Biztech Asian Midday Marketwatch. Our guest today is Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank. Now, Vishnu, great to have you on the show, the first Marketwatch of the year.
Happy New Year indeed, and of course, happy to be here on the first day, even though it means that it's much harder to figure out what's going on as coal engines get started.
and it's funny, I was just telling my partner that it's pouring oil into the engine and slowly getting the engine turning before it fires on all cylinders. Now, before we start, let's take a look at how crypto markets are performing, and then we'll move on to regional markets, where Australia, mainland China, and Japan are still closed for holidays. Now, Bitcoin is at 46,861.6. It's down 0.12%. Ethereum is at 3,789.59. It's down 0.82%. Now, moving on to regional stock markets, the SGX is at 3,132.14. It's up 0.27%. Bursa Malaysia is at 1,549.3. It's down sharply 1.16%. Looking at across to the Hang Seng is at 23,252.69. It's down 0.62%. Rounding up the numbers, we've got the Kospi, which is at 2,986.19. It's up 0.29%. Now, Vishnu, what stands out is Bursa Malaysia is down more than 1%. What are your thoughts on that? And also, of course, what's happening across the region?
Well, I think there are a few factors that are interacting and clashing together. One is on China's front, we've seen a real mixed bag. We've seen worries about Omicron mounting, but at the same time, we've also seen policy easing signals providing markets with some hope. If not already relief. And I think also across the board, we do see some position re-entering after the close of last year. So I think where we stand now, two things are quite clear. I think rounding up the year last year, despite the onset of Omicron, it looks like Q4 would be fairly resilient. So for those markets and those parts of the market that want to look at the half full, that's where you look to. Those that want to see the glass for what it is, where there's still a half empty glass left there, looking forward, might shift that focus and put it on the half empty aspects, particularly given that Omicron cases have been rising quite sharply in the US. And this begs a lot of questions from how the Fed may respond to what it means for Asia as well, because what we've experienced previously is that we do tend to get some after effects from US and Europe. So those are, I guess, factors to consider.
Vishnu, I want to ask you about whether you're a China bull or a China bear, because in 2021, China was almost a case of two halves, and there are some people, Morgan Stanley being one of them, that are bullish on China in 2022 for four particular reasons. They reckon that there will be a pause in tightening, there will be more relief in China's real estate sector, there will be probably less onerous energy targets for 2022, and they expect exports to remain strong in 2022. What are your thoughts on China?
I cannot help but to agree that, cyclically we turn and we start to look at China as a bull case in a bullish story in 2022, mainly driven by the fact that ahead of the the party congress in November, there's a huge impetus for not just economic stability, but economic buoyancy as well, because it's a very tricky leadership transition, and one can imagine that the requirement for political capital means that the economy must be humming away. The exact timing of this and the nature of this is what remains a huge question. So how are they going to navigate through the Winter Olympics with the usual restrictions that we anticipate from them on pollution versus activity? That's one question. The other is, at which point do they come in to say, let's really shore up the economy, and what at that point that would mean for the property sector, and their clamp down on some of the regulatory monopolistic aspects of tech. These are the remaining questions. So we are, I think, guardedly bullish, which is one reason why we think China's growth will be well above its structural trend. But looking beyond that, it is very difficult for us to be distracted from the view that if they want to impose common prosperity and if they want to do dual circulation that would require them to hoard more resources, these are going to cost the economy something.
Yes.
For those reasons, it'll be very difficult to, I think, also at the same time produce expectations beating growth. In fact, growth is more likely to moderate to 4 to 5% over the next 3 to 7 year horizon, despite the fact that it could be fairly buoyant in 2022.
I want to zoom in on Singapore. Singapore's numbers came in last night. It grew essentially 5.9% in the period October to December last year on a year-on-year basis. Now that exceeded economists' expectations with a poll by Reuters. They only expected 5.4%. But if you look at Singapore from a holistic point of view in 2022, it grew 7.2%. What's your read on these numbers and what is your outlook for Singapore in 2022?
Firstly, I think we need to decompose that into two parts. The headline 7% has been helped tremendously by a weak 2020. So the base effect is something we don't forget. But you're absolutely right. The cyclical upswing, or rather the upswing, the post-COVID improvement has been better than expected. And the rear view mirror says this as well, which is what you pointed out, 7.2%, stellar. Is Singapore going to continue to hum away fairly strongly? In all likelihood, yes. Part of the story comes from what we just discussed. China, a buoyant China may keep tides a little higher in Asia, not exceptionally lifting boats per se. You don't get shipwrecked or whatever. That's one. And I think that is going to translate into what PM Lee alluded to, about 3 to 5%. Shamefully for us, we're smack in the middle of that. We think it'll be about 4.1, 4.2% type of growth. But what we need to bear in mind is putting aside the underlying momentum, putting aside base effects, putting aside the bigger story that improvement will continue, not just in Singapore, but across Asia. The real risks from a risk perspective, what we need to bear in mind is not just Singapore, the entire Asia is still going to be subject to a little bit of start-stop, especially in the first half of the year. We are not distracted from that. The other point about this is until and unless tourism and more widely travel opens up in an unimpeded fashion, you're not going to get your full growth multipliers kicking in, which is to say it is going to be somewhat of a restrained improvement, even in 2022, even after we consider that the numbers will be better. I'm talking about the underlying momentum. And in Singapore's case, it's an open verdict out there what the property cooling measures would do, because we also cannot forget that a very buoyant property market with a wide spillover also helped the economy in 2021.
And where else did the growth come from in 2021, besides the property market?
I think the external sector was really strong. We did see Singapore being quite well placed in pharmaceuticals, in things like semiconductors. They were in the space where there was a lot of demand shortages, and so they were able to exploit both volume gains and price gains in these particular sectors, along with the overall improvement in the region, which meant that the reconnection of logistics more from a supply side rather than from a travel demand side. But those things, I think, came in together quite nicely to lift those aspects of Singapore's economy. That said, I think the challenges still remain. Transitioning in a world where we are not out in the clear yet and the Fed is starting to tighten, I think the takeaway for us is we are looking forward to further improvements, but we cannot be complacent that this will be just a given. So those are perhaps the takeaway for us for 2022.
Vishnu, as always, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
My pleasure.
Now, we've been speaking to Vishnu Varathan, Head of Economics and Strategy at Mizuho Bank on Biztech's Asian Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. This video and podcast will be on our various social media platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.